Good afternoon and welcome to this next Asian Midday Market Watch. It's Tuesday, the 6th of June, and we have Charu Chanana, market strategist from Saxo Markets, as our guest today. Charu, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Brian. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Now, Charu, before we get your insights, we're going to take a look and see how markets across the region have performed. But we will start first with market action. Bitcoin is down at 25,804. It's down 3.86%. Ethereum is at 1,817. It's down 2.79%. Now, looking across the regional stock markets, we start where you're at in Singapore. The Straits Times Index is up 0.04%. Bursa Malaysia is down 0.19%. Shanghai is unchanged. The ASX All Ordinaries is down 1.01%. The Nikkei is up 0.62%. The Hang Seng is up 0.54%. The Kospi is up 0.54% as well. Now, Charu, your views on market performance in the first half of the day?
So, Brian, certainly, I think the overnight markets didn't give us a lot of cues because we had, mostly unchanged performance from the US equity indices. But I think we've gotten quite used to seeing the fact that Japanese markets have been outperforming in the Asian session, usually in the last couple of months now. Today's, I think, key driver has been these expectations of more policy stimulus from China, and that has really helped some of the Chinese stocks that are listed in the Hong Kong exchange. And I think that's really just boosting the sentiment overall in Asia as well. But the clear divergence we've seen is in the Australian stock exchange, where we had a surprise rate hike from the RBA yet again, just ahead of we getting live here today.
So that Australian RBA number was surprising. But looking ahead, what are your thoughts in terms of how that may impact other regional central banks, given that rate hike decision?
So, second back-to-back surprise hike from the RBA has been confusing the markets a lot now. They paused at a moment when inflation was still quite high, and then they've announced two consecutive rate hikes, which were not really priced in by the markets. What for me is important here from a very Australia perspective is that this is increasing the chance of a policy error. I think that's something we need to continue to watch. Certainly right now, the recession versus inflation game is tilting more in favor of, inflation risks, and that's why we continue to see this. But comments today have hinted that inflation has peaked and it has started to come down, although it's still quite high. But despite that comment, we are continuing to see RBA, going ahead with more tightening does mean that, there could be more growth risks materializing down the line. And in terms of what this means for other central banks, like I said, I think everyone's turning to be a little bit more cautious now because of those growth risks and because of the fact that inflation is cooling, because of the fact that we are starting to build a case for the Fed to pause as well, which kind of obviously is a leading indicator of what other central banks will also do, right? So, I think all that is continuing to give some room to pause to most of the Asian central bankers. But also, of course, inflation being still too high doesn't mean that they are going to start signaling an end to their tightening cycles from here. But I would say maybe another 1 or 2 rate hikes, depending on which country we're talking about. But we are getting close to the end of the cycle there.
Now, Charu, the big news overnight was really the launch of Apple's augmented reality, virtual reality headset. What are your thoughts on this? And is this perhaps the start of the next super cycle for Apple as a growth stock?
Yeah, absolutely, Brian. I think that launch has created a lot of headlines. There was a lot of anticipation behind it. And I do think that Apple has launched this product and has kind of completely transformed the virtual reality industry. Whatever niche industry we have right now in that space was led by Meta so far. And most of those headset devices have so far only been used in gaming. But Apple's launch is kind of taking it a step further with, they were kind of showing, people using the general apps, looking at photos, looking at videos. They were trying to kind of bring it into your day-to-day life and day-to-day operations and how you interact with the Apple ecosystem. So that's very impressive. Plus, it gives you that extraordinary 3D experience where if you're watching a match, it appears like you're sitting live in a field and watching it, right? So I think the experience part of it and how you operate it is certainly a notch higher than what we have already seen in this industry so far. And just like you and I were discussing this previously as well, this can have a huge set of applications, both on the consumer front, as I mentioned, but also on the business side. So that opens up a whole new space for Apple as well. Of course, there are some limitations. The price point is a little bit higher than what generally analysts were expecting for it, and there are not enough applications on offer right now. So that may slow down the take up pace of this product immediately after its launch, which is expected to be early next year. But of course, if I look at it from a medium to long term time horizon, I do think it can really add a new stream of revenues to Apple's top line.
Now, finally, ISM numbers out of the US are a very important barometer. What are your expectations for those numbers moving ahead?
So yes, quite a disappointing set of numbers last night from the US, and why this was really important, I would say, is that we already know that the US economy is right now, it's a two-paced economy where the goods part of the economy is slowing down, but it was the services side of the economy that was keeping things afloat. But now, if we start to talk about services PMI starting to turn lower, I mean, it's just 1 month of data, but if this trend continues further, it is a concerning sign. That means that the peak of the services growth has also happened, right? So if you especially look at the forward-looking indicators in this report, both the new orders and the employment numbers, they kind of retreated from their April prints as well. Employment was actually in the contractionary territory. So I do see some reasons for concern there. I think risk aversion could potentially pick up in the markets as they open today, and we already saw a bit of that yesterday as well. But overall, just the recession concerns are going to be highlighted even more if services data starts to weaken from here, and it just builds up that case for the Fed pause, like we were just talking about earlier. The Fed to pause in June and kind of really assess the growth side of the equation as well, before making any further moves to kind of address the persistent inflationary pressures.
Charu, thanks for coming on the show. As always, great to have you on board.
Such a pleasure, Brian. Thank you for having me.
Now, I'm Brian Fernandez, and we've been speaking to Charu Chanana, market strategist from Saxo Markets, on BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. The show will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.